I deem this a highly important step in my career, but I know that our success depends very much on our own efforts. I trust that if it should come, I may not forget my duty in using it, not for my own aggrandizement, but for the advancement of the general good. Excerpt from The Life of Amos A. Lawrence. John Davison Rockefeller used this book for his inspiration in using his tough business practices to help America thrive. Rockefeller stated, "It was a good thing to let the money be my slave and not make myself a slave of money. I tried to remember that in every sense. I think money is a good thing if we know how to use it properly." Rockefeller used this mindset to work his way up into becoming the king of the oil industry. Standard Oil aided the economy by making oil cheaper, cleaner, and more accessible, as well as providing several jobs. Rockefeller made millions from this business. He gave a lot of his fortunes to charities, despite being labeled greedy by many due to his ruthless ways of business. He led America and the oil industry into more advanced times that still have an effect on people today. He earned his net worth of over $340 billion in today's money through his domination of the oil refining industry with one company, Standard Oil. He chose to work in the oil refining business since drilling would be a major gamble, and there is also an increasing need for cheap and clean kerosene in consumers' everyday lives. Rockefeller started out owning 30% of Standard Oil and with a future monopoly in possession of 10% of the oil refining industry. Rockefeller was always trying to make Standard Oil more efficient and profitable. He once stated, "I believe that thrift is essential to well-ordered living and that economy is a prime requisite of a fine financial structure." He saved thousands of dollars through vertical and horizontal integration. Between 1870 and 1885, Standard Oil reduced refining costs from around 3 cents to only 452 thousandths of a cent by using vertical integration. Vertical integration is the purchasing of companies at all levels of production. By 1879, Standard Oil had refined over 90% of the world's oil. Rockefeller used his copious savings from using vertical integration to buy out a majority of competing companies. This purchasing of companies from the same industry is known as horizontal integration. Rockefeller's ingenious horizontal integration strategy was to lower oil prices competitively so that opponents would go bankrupt. This strategy meant cheaper prices for consumers, and it sent the economy soaring. Consumers saved immensely on oil because of Rockefeller, so they had more money to spend on oil-run products and other consumer goods. Rockefeller once stated, "Let the good work go on. We must ever remember we are refining oil for the poor man, and he must have it cheap and good." Rockefeller had helped lead America out of the long depression and into a more economically sound time. Standard Oil also hired chemists that transformed petroleum waste into consumer goods such as grease and paint. Since these goods were from a byproduct of the oil refining process, they could be sold at a cheap rate as well. Standard Oil also produced thousands of jobs for those who needed them most. He paid his workers well because he believed that they would be satisfied and therefore more productive. John D. Rockefeller also felt that he was doing society a favor by organizing the oil industry and making it less chaotic. One business instead of several made trade more direct, orderly, and efficient. It also kept consumer prices at the lowest rates possible. His business led people into a more modern time with oil and led the oil industry into a more profitable and economical era. While some people exulted Rockefeller, many others saw him as a corrupt and greedy individual who created a business monster and used predatory price cutting to strike down his opponents. One person who profoundly felt this way was Ida Tarbell. She was a muckraker who aimed to expose and eliminate the injustices lurking throughout America. A strong motivation for her attack on Standard Oil was the Cleveland Massacre, where her own father had to choose between selling his small oil company to the mighty Rockefeller or competing with him with little to no chance of success.
He said, "I always offered them stock in Standard Oil. And if they turned that down, that was their mistake." And of course, technically, he was correct, because Standard Oil went on to be this, huge thing, and they would have all been millionaires. He created endless numbers of millionaires. But he didn't go to the other side of it, that is, if they didn't accept the stock, then he put them out of business.
Ida Tarbell was so deeply troubled by the monopoly of Standard Oil that she wrote a book about its many injustices. It was titled The History of the Standard Oil Company. In the book, she lists and explains what she feels is wrong about Standard Oil's practices. She wrote that an independent dealer once told her that he had to sneak oil out of Buffalo because they were all afraid of offending the Standard Oil Company. This book caused a multitude of people to oppose Rockefeller and Standard Oil's methods. She observed several wrongdoings of Standard Oil. One of these concerned his alliances with railroad companies. In order to receive Rockefeller's business, railroad companies would grant Rockefeller immense rebates for large shipments of oil. Rebates were an unfair practice since it gave monstrous trusts like Standard Oil a financial edge over small companies. Also, Ida Tarbell believed Rockefeller was using predatory pricing, the act of lowering prices to an unprofitable rate just to eliminate the competition. This was also a corrupt practice since it practically eliminated small businesses' chances to participate in free enterprise. Many people were afraid of Standard Oil because they felt that the government was losing power of the economy to Standard Oil. According to Tarbell, it is allied with many other industries, iron, steel, and copper, and can swing freight away from a road which does not oblige it. It has great influence in the stock market and can depress or inflate a stock if it sets about it. Although Standard Oil frightened the public, it did not intimidate Theodore Roosevelt. Roosevelt took part in the progressive movement and was able to abominate Standard Oil for good by enforcing the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890. Roosevelt sued Standard Oil, and 2 years later, the Supreme Court declared the Standard Oil Trust to be an illegal monopoly. Rockefeller was forced to break down his immense company. Rockefeller lost much of his business power and influence from this, but some pieces of Standard Oil still exist today. A few of them are ExxonMobil, BP, Texaco, Gulf, and Chevron. They remain successful companies that many people rely on for oil to date. Rockefeller's legacy also lives on through his countless charity works. He was an exceptionally intelligent philosopher, and his intentions were to help good people. He once stated, "Giving should be entered into in just the same way as investing. Giving is investing." He gave away a large number of his fortunes. It is estimated that Rockefeller donated over $500 million to charities, public works projects, and those in need.
Things that grandfather did was to establish Spelman College, which is college for black women in Atlanta. And he did this back in the 1880s, before people were interested either in blacks or in women.
In 1903, Rockefeller Sr. gave away $129 million to create the General Education Board, which would promote an American education without distinction of sex, race, or creed. One of his largest charity works is the Rockefeller Foundation. This foundation has given over $14 billion to thousands of grantees around the world. Scientist Norman Borlaug of the Rockefeller Foundation has even received a Nobel Peace Prize for his agricultural programs in Mexico and having saved an estimation of over 1 billion lives. In essence, Rockefeller has saved those lives too. This foundation, as well as all of Rockefeller's charity works, has encouraged both his children and grandchildren to care for those in need. John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil led America into modern ways of using oil while increasing accessibility to refined oil. It also served as an example for how to run a successful business in America. Although it was greatly reduced in size and Rockefeller was deemed greedy by many, Standard Oil positively affected a multitude of people. His business style has inspired great businessmen today, such as Bill Gates. According to Ron Chernow, as businessmen, both are very focused, very intense, and very driven men, and with the same missionary faith in themselves, in their companies, and in the future of their industries. Rockefeller also aided others and lives on through the remnants of his company and his charity works that will continue to influence people's lives for generations to come.